So we're going to give away a couple more prizes. Does that work for you?
Now.
The next winner is, we're giving away, should we do a selfie, he said, all right, we're giving away another.
All right, she said selfie stick.
Selfie stick. Yeah. So newly branded SE stick. 990492. 990492. Who's our lucky winner? And the Chromecast is going to. You ready for your picture here? We're going to get the big handoff, smile. Oh, that's good. All right, ready? Next winner is 990647. 647. Yeah, oh, nice. We have 2 from the back, 2 from the front. We're being very well distributed here today. Congratulations. We're going to do, you ready? See your next smile.
All right, we got 2 more towards the end. But before we get there, the reason we are all here in the first place is kids, right? The reason that we decided to be teachers, the reason that we decided to be in education. But you know, there's always that one kid in your class that you remember, right? You can remember the name right now, can't you? There's a couple people in this room that remember my name, guarantee. And I just saw a hand go up, so there you go. Jonathan Mooney was definitely one of those kids that you would remember. I definitely was too, but that's a whole different story. Jonathan has an amazing story, a very inspiring story, and I think you guys will relate to it. But more importantly, I want you to be thinking, I want you to be inspired today by what personalized learning can look like for all learners. Not just the learners that can grasp onto it quickly, but all of your learners. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jonathan Mooney.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing? Morning still? Okay, good morning, man. To be specific. My name is Jonathan Mooney, and I can't tell you how excited, privileged, and honored I am to be a part of this gathering today. You know, in EDCO, 25 years they're celebrating today. That's a big deal. Can we give them a big round of applause for that? Now, before I get to it, I do want to just take a moment and do a few pieces of housekeeping of my own. You know, first and foremost, I'd love to give you a sense of how I'd like to spend my time with you together this morning, as well as my breakout session this afternoon. You know, I read recently that the average human attention span is about 15 minutes, right? It's about 15 minutes. And then I read that the average attention span of an educator at a conference is about 15 seconds, right? So I want to assure you all that I am going to respect that research and keep my talking at you down to a manageable minimum and make sure that I leave plenty of time this afternoon in particular for us to talk together in the form of questions, conversation, and dialogue. Does that sound like a good plan? Yeah, that work for y'all? Okay. Second piece of housekeeping. You know, I'm a big believer, obviously, given my background, that folks have to make a learning experience work for them. They got to do what they have to do to be successful. And I know that I, myself, if I was in your shoes, could not sit still in a room like this for even 15 seconds. So if you were like me, and you need to multitask on your phone while I'm talking, it's all good. You need to go to the back of the room and pace back and forth while I'm presenting, it's all good. You need to leave the room and take a break. It's no problem. I won't be offended. I myself may wander off in the middle of my presentation. And you all will be accepting, inclusive, and accommodating of that, I'm sure, right? But in all seriousness, hey, this is your time. You do what you need to do to have a good time. Third, final, and most important piece of housekeeping, I do want to take a moment and I want to recognize the good folks who make a conference like this happen. And I'm sure you all know that this is a volunteer organization, folks that got day jobs, working hard for kids every day, and they come together to put this on. And as I mentioned, for 25 years in a row, and that's an amazing thing, because it's conversations about innovation and education that are the most important conversations we can have as a country. And it's you all who come here on your free time to learn about doing differently for kids who struggle and for all kids that are going to make the biggest contribution to the future of this nation. And that's a big deal. So I'm honored to be a small part of that today, and I ask us to give that board of directors and the volunteers who make this happen, can we give them a big round of applause for doing so? Okay, with all that said and done, let me get to my piece here. You know, I was really asked here today to share with y'all two things. You know, on one hand, I was asked to share my professional journey of working with young folks who struggle in traditional academic environments. And I've really done nothing in my life other than work with those kids. As a direct instructional individual, working with kids in classrooms, as an advocate, trying to move the dial for kids who learn and live differently, and then also as somebody who's worked with systems, state departments of education, as well as individual schools to build innovative learning experiences. So I was asked to sort of share some lessons and learning from that. But on the same time, I was also asked to share with you all something even more important, and that was my personal experience and journey as a young person who struggled in school. And I did. You know, when I was growing up, I was what the folks in my school community lovingly referred to as one of those kids, right? Y'all know any of those kids? Who has a classroom full of those kids, right? Well, that was Jonathan Mooney, right? I was one of those kids who had such a hard time sitting still that I spent most of the day chilling out with the janitor in the hallway, right? I was one of those kids who had such a hard time keeping his mouth shut in middle school that I grew up on a first-name basis with Shirley, the receptionist, in the principal's office, right? And I was one of those kids in high school who had such a hard time learning to read, and specifically a torturous time reading out loud, that I spent most of my high school experience hiding in the bathroom to escape reading out loud with tears streaming down my face. I did not learn to read until I was 12 years old. Couldn't read until I was 12. Growing up, I had every label you could imagine. I was labeled the bad kid. I was considered the at-risk kid. I was obviously the special ed kid. Eventually, I was called the special snowflake, right? And I struggled every day. Struggled with sitting still, with reading. I struggled with a narrow learning environment in which I felt like the stupid, crazy, and lazy kid. And my struggles in school culminated in me leaving school for about a year and a half in sixth grade. That year when I left school, 12 years old, I had a plan for suicide. And I struggled with a number of mental health challenges, anxiety, and depression, among other things. And I spent about 2 years in and out of a variety of different educational settings. I went to homeschool, alternative schools, and at times I went to no school. So you can imagine by the time I got back into my high school experience, actually went to high school here in Denver, Colorado, at Green Mountain High School. When I got back to Green Mountain, right on, some amazing teachers there that changed my life. When I got back to high school, there were a lot of low expectations that faced me. Low expectations that I had for myself, low expectations my peers had, low expectations that my family had, low expectations that unfortunately some educators in my life had. You know, I heard it all. I heard that I would most likely be a high school dropout. I heard I'd flip burgers for a living. I heard that I might end up in jail or incarcerated. So I was asked here today to really tell a story of how I transcended those low expectations and beat those odds. Because opposed to being a high school dropout, I became a college graduate. And I graduated from Brown University, which is an Ivy League university, with an honors degree. With an honors degree in, of all things, English literature, right? Opposed to flipping burgers, I ended up writing books. The first book I wrote at the age of 21 as an undergraduate at Brown. And opposed to being an inmate, I became an advocate. Somebody working to move the dial for kids who get the short end of the stick sometimes. So I was really asked to talk about that journey of change. And I was asked to answer a very valid and honest question I'm asked all the time when people hear about that journey of change, which is, Jonathan, how did you do it, right? How could you go from a 6th grade dropout who couldn't read at 12 years old to an Ivy League English major published author? How did you do that, Jonathan? What drugs did you take? And where can I buy some, right? So I want to talk about what facilitated my journey of change. And the reality is, and it wasn't the magic of pharmaceuticals that facilitated my journey of change. It wasn't a fancy tutoring program that facilitated my journey of change. In my life, it was folks who had a deep commitment to reimagining what was possible in my education using technology. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't those folks. And that's through the continuum of my education. It started early, back in the old days, when it was innovative to provide me books on tape, right? Those things were so big you had to put them in a backpack and plug them into a generator, But that made a difference. And it went on to be innovations in the way that information was disseminated at Brown University using some of the first MOOC technology that exists. And it continues to this day using innovative platforms that document competency-based learning in my own life as an adult. I had folks who committed to reimagining what education could be. And I think that's the opportunity that we have right now as a community, as folks who care about the future for young people. We have an inflection point in which technology can be used to reinforce or augment an outdated system, or it can be used to reimagine what learning is for the 21st century. And it's people who did that changed my life. And it's individuals all around the country like you who are creating a new definition of what's possible with learning with these innovations. And I've seen it everywhere I've gone. I've seen folks like you using technology to reimagine how we learn, what we learn, and where we learn. And it was that reimagining that made the biggest impact for me, so I want to tell you a little bit about it. So let me start with that first area of profound change. Reimagining how young people learn. If you were an alien and you descended on schools today, you would assume that young people learn in a passive way, right? 75% of the school day is spent with young folks sitting still, right? On average, there's about 14 and a half minutes of recess in American elementary schools. And then the number one punishment, if you can't sit still, for 75% of the day, is to lose your 14 and a half minutes of recess, right? And that model of passive learning has devastating consequences for kids like me and for all kids, right? Let me immerse you into those consequences for a moment, right? Let me immerse you into my relationship with the school desk. Because in my life, it wasn't ADD that was really my disability. It was a passive approach to learning. ADD is a difference, right? There are good things about it, there are bad things about it. I'm not naive about the bad things when it comes to ADD. I struggle with executive functioning, I struggle with organization. I have the attention span of a gnat, okay? I'm not naive about that, but there are good things that come hand in hand with those bad things, right? Research shows that some folks with ADD are more entrepreneurial and creative than the general population. There's research that shows that EMTs, emergency medical professionals with ADD, firemen and women, paramedics, are better at their job than so-called normal EMTs. That makes sense, right? Your house is on fire, you want that dude to have ADD, right? Hey, forget listening to directions in my stuff, you know? So it's a difference. It's got good things about it, bad things about it. It was a difference in my life that became disabled by a passive learning environment, by that sitting still. It may come as a surprise to you that me and that school desk didn't get along too well, right? You know, this is first grade, this is 12th grade, this is Brown University, this is today, it doesn't matter. This is how it goes down for me at the desk. 5 seconds into class, the foot started bouncing, right? 10 seconds into class, both feet start bouncing. 15 seconds into class, I'm gonna bust out those drums, right? 15 minutes into class, it is all over. I'm the kid trying to take his leg and put it behind his neck, right? And that young person is often shamed in that passive environment, you know? Because we have a deeply held belief that the good kid is the kid who sits still. I know my father believed that, right? I grew up in a good old school Irish Catholic household, and at the dinner table with my pops, guess what? Good kids sat still. So every night with my dad, it was, Jonathan, what's wrong with you? Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And the same thing happened in some of my classrooms. Not all of my classrooms, don't get me wrong, but some of them. Never forget, I had this teacher in 2nd grade named Mrs. C, right? I've had many, many gifted, brilliant teachers in my life who I will celebrate with you today. Mrs. C is not one of those, right? My foot would be bouncing, she would stop class, she would point at me, all the kids would look at me, and she would say at the top of her lungs, Jonathan, what is your problem, right? And I grew up thinking that because I couldn't sit still, I was the problem or bad kid. It became a social identity that eventually became a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Y'all have seen it. You know, kids live up to that expectation. You know what went through my mind when I got to 8th grade? I said, well, if I'm the bad kid, I'm going to be the best bad kid you've ever seen, right? I'm going to run with that sense of self. And that happens all the time in these passive learning environments. Let me give you one of the best examples of that I have seen in all of my travels, of how young kids are disabled by that passive experience. My favorite bad kid story comes from Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I was there some time ago observing 3rd grade classrooms. And I'll never forget it. I went to this one 3rd grade classroom, and when I walked in from the front of the room and the back of the room, I could see a set of bookshelves made into boxes about 3 feet tall. So they've taken some bookshelves about this big, made a box. And in one of the boxes, I could see a head bouncing up and down. It was one of the 3rd graders in the box jumping. Now that's not a sight that you see every day, is it? So I turned to the teacher, and with all due respect, I said, hey man, what's up with the box? You know? What's going on? The guy looked at me with a straight face, and not a hint of irony. He said, Jonathan, that's Jack. He said, you have a Jack in the box? They put poor little Jack back in the room in a box. I don't gotta belabor the point, right? ADD wasn't Jack's problem, the box was Jack's problem, right? The passive learning environment where we've doubled down on sit down was the problem because we just ain't designed to learn that way. You know, for me and for Jack, when I'm bouncing my foot, I'm rocking those drums, I'm not doing it to be disrespectful or disruptive. I'm doing it because movement accesses a physical motor memory that facilitates focusing. In plain English, if I don't move, my brain turns off. I can't learn, right? We have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to utilize disruptive technology to change from a passive learning environment to an active learning environment. I have a project right now with the Clark County School District, which is the district that encompasses the city of Las Vegas. It's the 4th or 5th largest school district in the country. They're building a one-to-one ecosystem for enabled classrooms, and at the same time shifting from a passive learning environment where teachers disseminate content to an active problem and project-based learning environment where kids engage with questions, where they don't sit, but they do. And in 2 years of that pilot, with Title I schools, some of the most at-risk young people in America, those young folks' academic scores have gone up by 50%. Their attendance rates have tripled. Their referrals for suspension and detention have plummeted. But most importantly, it's young folks who are engaged and ignited by learning again. They shift the environment using technology for people to research projects and work on their own time on content from a passive to an active learning environment. They don't sit, but they do. They don't memorize right answers, but they learn to ask the right questions, and that's the most important skill for success in the 21st century. And you all can be the front lines of that change, reimagining how we learn. But you can also use technology to reimagine what we learn in a profound way. You know, 75% of American instructional hours, 75% of instructional hours in school are spent on 2 skills and 2 skills alone. Guess what those are? Reading and math, right? When you take away math, reading constitutes 65% of the school day for young people, right? And if you don't got that reading brain, if you struggle with school, you leave feeling like you are stupid. You know, that's what I believe. You know, again, in my life, dyslexia was a difference, you know. It didn't have to be a disability. There were weaknesses with it. I struggled with spelling. I struggled with reading. I had bad handwriting. I got that. But there are strengths that come hand in hand with that. Creativity, entrepreneurship. In the 21st century, there's no reason that those have to be impairments in your life. You can get help for those. When I went to college, my mom would spell check my papers. I'll be honest with y'all, I married my spell checker, okay? It's called strategic dating. If you haven't tried it, you should try it, right? My girlfriend at the time, my wife, mother of my 3 children right now, she was empowering me. And then, of course, technology turned what was a disability into a nuisance at best. What disabled me wasn't the cognitive difference. What disabled me was the belief that because I didn't have the reading brain, that I was the dumb kid. And the fact that in school, there was no time to build the other human faculties that lead to people flourishing in their life. And I grew up feeling dumb. Too many young people in school grow up feeling stupid. There's a crisis around that. Every time I talk to incarcerated young people, which I do often, there's one word that unites the white kids in the room, Latinos in the room, Native Americans in the room, African Americans in the room. One word. Guess what that word is? I'm dumb. They heard that they were stupid because we've conflated or confused the faculty of intelligence with the narrow skill set of reading, and we've only invested in that skill. You know, and that's something that goes down in school, but let's be honest, it goes down in our broader culture, doesn't it? You know, I'm the father of 3, right? I got 3 boys, you know. And my oldest boy, his name is Max. And Max is going in the 3rd grade at the end of the summer. And you know, Max, he didn't have the reading brain when he started school. You know, left-handed, you know, beautiful artist and drawer, but he just struggled with reading. Give you a sense of his struggles with reading, you know. In 1st grade, he came home one day and he said, "Dad, what they're having me read is so easy. I can read it with my eyes closed." Like, that ain't reading, son, you know? Like, hey, don't get me wrong, right? It's telepathy or something, right? You know, you gotta celebrate the strength, you know? But that is not decoding phonemes, you know? And he started to feel dumb because the whole day was about reading. And he lived in a community in which everyone had a genius on their hand in Santa Monica, California, right? And how did they Anybody know they had baby Einstein at home? He was always reading. Now I hear things like this, hanging out with moms and dads. I hear, oh, my kid's so smart. They know all their letters and they're 3 years old. Oh, my kid's so smart, they're reading chapter books and they're in kindergarten. Oh, my kid's so smart, they know phonics and they're in utero, right? It's never my kid's so smart, they're good at building or talking or drawing or creating. It's a narrow band of skills that we have elevated at the expense of all others. And that gets doubled down upon in school because of that 65% of the day spent on one skill. And if you don't got that skill, you learn pretty quickly that you're the dumb kid and you find yourself in the dumb group. Who remembers the dumb group from when they were growing up? Anybody? Let me ask that question a little differently because the reality is everybody in this room, your hand should have went up because we all went to schools that had the smart group and the stupid group. They didn't call it that, don't get me wrong. Nobody's malicious in that way, but everybody knew it. Who remembers the reading groups from when they were growing up? Can I ask you all a question about those reading groups? Was it ever hard to tell which reading group was the smart group and which reading group was the dumb group? It wasn't hard to tell, right? You had the blackbirds over here, you have the bluebirds over here, and then over in the annex trailer building, all right? You had the sparrows, you know? Come on now, we all know the smart group and the stupid group. We put it this way, when I was growing up, everybody knew that my group was a dumb group because my group was a bird that did not fly, okay? It was an ostrich and it ran quickly, you know? And I was reading See Spot Run and everybody knew that the condors were the smart group because the condors were reading War and Peace, okay? It ain't hard to figure out what skills get you into that group. It ain't your ability to read or to write or to spell. It's a narrow definition of intelligence around those things. Negating your ability to draw, create, problem solve, to be a part of a community, to have an emotional intelligence. It's a narrow band of skills that we institutionalize in our time priorities by spending most of the day on reading. But you all have an opportunity to change that. Personalized reading platforms are a godsend to my son. He's in a classroom now in which no one knows the smart kid or the stupid kid. There is no smart group or stupid group because this is being delivered in a personalized and individualized way. It's being delivered in a way that frees up time for reading specialists, for individual educators to do deep one-on-one work in a way that isn't stigmatizing because everyone in this class has something they can grow, whether they're like my son, who's working to be a competent reader, or whether they're being a fluent, excellent reader. It does not matter. There's an opportunity to remediate reading better with digital technology that will save kids' lives from feeling like they are stupid and dumb. There's also an opportunity to accommodate those reading challenges. Speech to text and text to speech technology gives me an opportunity to engage with literature or nonfiction that's at my IQ level. I'm sure you all have seen in the old school classroom, you got that kid who's got ideas and passion, but what do they spend all day reading? See Spot Run, Dick and Jane. And they learn helplessness and they fail because they're not engaged in an authentic way. Give that young person a digital book so they can listen to it. And all of the research shows that when young folks listen to literature or text, when they speak it opposed to write it, it builds their ability to be readers and writers down the road. It's not an either or, it's a both. These platforms lead for better remediation, they're non-stigmatizing, and they give individuals the opportunity to engage with information in a passionate and real way. But most importantly, and most profoundly, is they open up time again to build those broader skill sets. Because if you're a kid like me in the old school model and you struggle with school, your entire education is doubling down on your problem, right? I get pulled from the art class to go to the phonics class. I don't get to do anything fun after school in the robotics program because I'm working on my handwriting. Jonathan Mooney would have been a pretty good debater, don't you think? But in the summer, I didn't get to go to debate camp. I went to phonics camp, right? The entire experience was deficit-oriented and about a narrow skill set. But you have a chance to get that back. When we remediate more effectively and accommodate in a profound way, there's times to rebuild those islands of competency in the school day. There's research that shows that young folks who struggle in school, they're never going to make it unless they have those times in the day where they feel successful. But those are disappearing too. If you're a program improvement school under No Child Left Behind, the first thing to get cut from you are the art classes, right? The robotics program, all those things that keep kids showing up, right? They're disappearing, those islands of competency to focus on reading, use technology to get it back and build a broader skill set. And that's an imperative. It's an imperative for me, because I feel dumb every day, and I need not to feel stupid. But it's an imperative for all kids, because in the future, we can't leave any right brains behind. We need a new constellation of skill sets. Gallup, as an organization, does an annual poll of employers, right? They've been doing it for 40 years. What are the most important skills you're looking for in employees? They asked millions of job creators around the world that question. And in the 1960s, it was reading, writing, right? And arithmetic. In the 1980s, it was teamwork and a set of social skills. But in 2015, the answer is resiliency, intrinsic motivation, and guess what? Creativity. Moving away from 75% of the day being about reading, being more effective in remediating and accommodating that skill, and building a school environment where kids have multiple ways to be smart. Where intelligence isn't one thing, but many things, that's an opportunity you have. Now I got one more, right? I'll tell you one more shift. So in my life, technology was used to shift how I learn. From a passive to an active experience, not sitting, but doing, not memorizing, but questioning. And in my life, what I learned changed. I had an opportunity to focus on a broader set of skills by being more effective in remediation and accommodation with reading. And last but not least, we are on the cusp of a profound opportunity around where kids learn. And in my life, nobody embodies that better than my mom. I want to tell you about my mom real quick. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Colleen Mooney, right? Wouldn't have survived my childhood school experience. I want to give you a mental image of my mom for a moment so y'all can see her in your mind, because I love her so much, right? A lot of folks underestimated my mom in her life as a human being, and also in her journey as somebody partnering in my education. They underestimated my mom for a variety of different reasons. My mom's not the tallest woman in the world. On a good day, in high heels, on her tippy toes, my mom, she is 4'11", right? She's a little Irish bulldog, So folks, kind of dismissed her. They dismissed her because she also wasn't a wealthy woman, nor an educated woman in the traditional sense of that term. My mom had my brother when she was 17. And she raised my brother and 2 sisters on welfare in San Francisco. Barely graduated from high school, never went to college. Somebody who learned outside the lines herself and didn't get the support and nurturing that she needed. So a lot of people dismissed her. She wasn't tall, she wasn't wealthy, and they also dismissed her because she had this funny voice. Very high-pitched, squeaky voice that sounded like Mickey Mouse, okay? But people dismissed my mom at their own peril. She wasn't tall, she wasn't wealthy, she sounded like Mickey Mouse fine, but my mother, she cursed like a truck driver, right? So let me ask y'all a question. If you were the principal or a teacher, when Jonathan Mooney was having a hard time, did you want Colleen in your office? The answer to that question, if you are at all confused, is no, okay? That's where my mom was, every day cursing Mickey Mouse, fighting for me, right? Advocating for me. And what she advocated most for was an expanded definition of where my learning could happen, right? was a big fight, not gonna lie to you. We tend to think about learning as happening within the school day, and a little bit outside of the school day, but my mom said no. You know, and the biggest fight my mom had to do was with every single Friday in school. When I was in elementary school, every single Friday was spelling test day, right? What a wonderful way to end the week, you know? And y'all know a kid like me, you know, I would torture myself for that spelling test day. You know, on Monday, I'd get my words and I would do 2 hours of flashcards to get them in. And then on Tuesday, I would fill the words with blocks. And then on Wednesday, I would draw the words in the sand. And then on Thursday, I would do interpretive dance to get the words in, right? And what happened every Friday? Failed that test every Friday. Not this one Friday, never forget, middle of 3rd grade, I come down to the breakfast table. There's no more flashcards, no interpretive dance, last minute cramming. My mom says, Jonathan, today we're gonna ditch school and go to the zoo. And every Friday for 1 year, because the school would not capitulate on the importance of spelling tests or accommodate that, every Friday me and my mom did what she called get good at something day. Every Friday. I loved animals, right? So we went to the LA Zoo. I learned a lot about ecosystems and habitat right there, didn't I? You know, I was a builder, a tinkerer, taking things apart, putting them back together. We had a contractor friend. I went to the job site, and I learned about architecture and contextualized math. You know, I was obviously the class clown. So my mom enrolled me in some improv classes, and I got applause opposed to suspensions, right? My mother understood that learning happens everywhere. That those contextualized experiences are often some of the most profound, and I am here today and made it to Brown University because of get good at something day, right? Now, a long time ago, the USA Long time ago, the USA Today asked me a question when they did an article about my book. They said, hey, Jonathan, give us an inspiring message for the young people of America about how you made it to Brown University. And I said, well, ditch school, right? Because, hey, we ain't doing get good at something day at a systemic level now, are we? And that ain't your fault. That ain't your principal's fault. That's policymakers' fault. We got the wrong priorities and values when it comes to what it means to educate. And what we know right now is there's a crisis of engagement. Gallup organization does polls of students every year. Last Gallup poll of 10 million students in America, the engagement rates were the lowest in the history of asking the question. What happens when packaged curriculum becomes the norm? People disengage from learning. There's a great research study by a friend of mine, a scholar named John Rogers at UCLA School of Education. He's given students in California time diaries to find out when are they most engaged in transformative learning, and it is not in school. It's when they're doing projects outside of school. It's when they're applying new information. It's in after-school programs. It's in all those spaces. So we, as a community who cares about education, we have a chance to do that differently, to reimagine that, to make interest and engagement the center and most important metric of education. Because no one's going to do better on their standardized test scores if they're bored and disengaged. It's the most important thing. And in my life, when I've seen innovative environments, they care about first and foremost finding a passion or purpose for a learner. You know? And second, they turn that into an interest that can become a pathway, right? And I'll tell you, I've never met a young person who doesn't have a passion that can become a purpose, that can become a pathway. I've never met it. Every young person has it. Some of them are misapplying their passions, right? You know? I really learned that from this kid named Juan. I'll tell you about Juan real quick. Because he embodies the power of engaged learning, but also the role that technology can play to facilitate that and build an ecosystem of learning outside of the classroom in a profound way. You know, one of the things I do in LA is I help organizations, after-school programs, colleges, schools, think about building personalized learning networks, right? Using technology. And one of the first people I worked with was this kid named Juan, right? He wanted to be a part of this program. And Juan had a tough life. Juan was arrested when he was 13 for running a 50-person drug ring in South LA. It was a serious narcotics deal. He struggled with school, grew up in special ed, struggled with reading, dropped out when he was in 6th grade. He joined the family business. It's what his dad did, it's what his uncles did, right? And he got arrested. You know, he went to jail, he served his time, he got out, he came to our program that we were building, and he was very contrite. And he said, you know, what I did was wrong. I don't want to be that person anymore, but I don't know if I can change because I'm not good at anything. You know, he was in a school environment in which the deficit model took over his entire identity. He had no sense of his strengths, gifts, and talents. He said, I'm not good at anything. And I had a realization in that moment. You know, I looked at Juan and I said, Juan, 50-person drug ring. I said, you're an entrepreneur, brother. Now, I was honest with Juan. I said, hey, man, we got to get you a different product, you know? We got to get you some hoodies or some logos or something to sell. But, brother, we can work on that. We can build on that. And an innovative group of teachers, I'll never forget these folks, right? From LAUSD. They came together to ask themselves, how do we build a pathway for Juan around his passions and talents? They engaged in an emerging interest-based platform called Thrively that's being incubated in Los Angeles, which allows young people to access strength-based learning experience, accreditates that strength-based learning experience to put it into a form of competencies to document real learning, and brings it all together into a personalized portfolio that draws from traditional school experiences, absolutely, but goes beyond that to draw from community colleges, to draw from MOOCs and all of the content that's out there in the world, and to draw from place-based learning, projects that Juan was doing in the real world. And Juan built this pathway with Thrively, with his teachers, people like you, that merged his two interests, entrepreneurship and graphic design. Because he was a gifted artist, he was misapplying that creativity onto the side of your building, right, in the form of graffiti, but nonetheless he had talent. We accredited that, and we built a pathway that got him through high school, got him enrolled in a community college, and ultimately got him to develop a small business where he marketed products to urban youth using a design aesthetic. We built a personalized learning network in replace of a standardized school experience that allowed him to scale his strengths, and that's the future for all kids. Okay, I want to conclude now. And I want to conclude by coming back to, in some respect, where we started, where I started, but even more importantly than that, where the conference started. We're celebrating those folks here in this audience who are waking up every day and innovating and reimagining what education could be in the 21st century, because it is imperative that we do that. You know, education needs a new value proposition to engage students. You know, the old school value proposition was, hey, if you